Welcome to Fortress of Faith with Tom Wallace, calling North America to repentance and revival.
Well, we're back once again at the Corner of Truth and Courage. Thank you for joining us here today at Fortress of Faith. Today I want to draw your attention to the upcoming elections here in these United States. I heard this in the last election that of American Christians in voting, if Christians really truly united in voting, actually registered to vote and voted, that every election, every office, every position, local or national, could be wielded by the will of Christians if they would get out and vote. Here's the sad reality. Half of the members of churches in the United States are actually registered to vote. Only half, 50%. So think about that for a moment. In your church, it's likely, if your church runs 100 or 50 or 1,000 or more, half of them are probably not even registered to cast a vote in this upcoming election. That is pitiful. We have a 50% registration record in the United States of Christians. We often bellyache, over what's going on in our land. And I had a missionary friend that would put it this way: if you don't vote, then you have no right to complain. If you didn't get out there and vote, you lost your rights to complain on how things are going. Not that we should live our life to have the right to complain. I get that. But it is wrong for you to complain if you didn't even care to cast a vote. And some people out there saying, well, my vote won't matter. Well, add that up of the people who have that attitude. 50% of Christians in churches today kind of have that attitude, perhaps. Well, my vote won't matter. Listen, it does matter. Don't listen to the lie that your vote doesn't matter, because it does. It really does. And don't be drawn into this trap. Now, here's the other sad fact. Of those who are registered to vote, only half of them actually cast a vote in the last presidential election. So that means half of the voices of the churches in America can't vote because they don't even register to vote. And those who did care to register didn't care to actually get out there and put forward their vote. And so that means that 25% of the voices of Christians in these United States are actually speaking out and trying to do something. They're voting according to their conscience. 75% of Christians in America don't. That is a terrible statistic. It's been this way for quite some time. And actually, Trump mentioned something about that here just this week that caught my attention when he mentioned it, because I've been aware of these statistics for some time. And they're not changing, sadly, even though people like me are out on the radio or in the airwaves and saying, hey, let's get people registered to vote. We need more organization in our churches to get out the vote, to register people to vote. It's very painless. Most people can register through the form in less than 2 minutes. It doesn't take too long to do it. Would to God we had more Christians that were concerned for their nation. I know many are, that they would contact their pastors and say, hey, pastor, would you mind we're not going to tell people how to vote, who to vote for, but just to get the vote out, can we bring in registration documents there for people to fill out, and we'll take that back in for them and get them registered to vote. Many pastors would be happy if someone would take it upon themselves to do that. I really believe that. Many pastors would. Now, I get it. Some pastors sadly don't understand what it means of separation of church and state. And so let me explain a little bit about that, because I think there's quite a bit of confusion on that. The separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. It's not. It's not in the First Amendment. Some people honestly believe it is. They've been taught and indoctrinated that it is. It's not. It was a document it was an effort by Johnson. We call it the Johnson Amendment. Back when he was running to be senator, there were some nonprofits, some churches that were eagerly voting against him, trying to get people to cast a vote against him. And so he had an amendment done in a tax reform bill to say that nonprofits, churches, 501c3s, are not to use their resources for candidates and stuff, and on elections. So officially, the actual ruling is that pastors cannot use church resources, send out stamps that are paid for, or letters that are paid for by the church, or raise or take money that was raised by the church, by the funds of the church, for supporting a particular candidate or whatever. But that doesn't mean they have the right to, it doesn't stop them from the free speech from the pulpit to say, hey, folks, we're going to have an election. We've got this candidate and we've got this candidate. This candidate supports XYZ. XYZ is against God. These are policies that are ungodly. They are not righteous. But this candidate supports policies A, B, C, and A, B, C are consistent with the ways of God. And so therefore, I'm recommending to you as your pastor that we get behind candidate that has policies A, B, C. And now we can't raise funds as a church for him, but I want to encourage you to do what you can to vote for him and oppose this other candidate who stands for XYZ, because these things are not spiritual. They're not righteous. We're not saying that candidate that stands for policies ABC is necessarily a righteous person, but the policies they stand for are things that are in the category of righteousness. So therefore, I want to encourage you to vote for him. Every pastor has that right to do so. And pastors have challenged the government on this, that they've had certain days, we used to do this for about 10, 15 years, to challenge the government to even use the Johnson Amendment against the churches. Go ahead and try. And they preached their sermons, gave the recordings, sent the recordings to the government saying, we dare you to prosecute us, because they know that even the Johnson Amendment wouldn't stand up in the courthouse. It is non-constitutional. And not one church has ever been prosecuted. So a lot of pastors out there who have this idea to say, well, we can't get involved in these things because we cannot afford to lose our tax-exempt status, because that's what they're afraid of by this bill, that they think if they say anything political that they're going to lose their tax-exempt status. And sadly, you know what that tells me? That some pastors are more concerned of not speaking the truth because it is economically a problem for them. Now, it's not, as I just mentioned, they're not going to lose their tax-exempt status, but it tells me they're governed by dollars more than being governed by truth, and that is a problem. But churches don't need to be in fear of this Johnson Amendment, the separation of church and state bill that whatever they call it, they're beating preachers and churches over the head with the fear of it when it really does not exist. But getting back to my original point, we Christians are charged with the Bible verse for us to be salt and light in our communities. And so when evil and wrong shows up in our community, we ought to be the salt of the earth and light, to shed light on the wrong and evil, and oppose it, to be the salt, to bring purification and righteousness into our communities, and opposing evil candidates that stand for policies that are anti-God, anti-biblical, and promote sinful, wicked actions. And there's a party that is greatly invested in that. Not saying that both parties are, that the other party is squeaky clean, because they're not. But it's quite evident that one party is supporting sinful, wicked, lewd behavior, and they do it often. And so when we get out and vote, we need to vote righteously. And if you're not registered to vote, then consider this, that, it's not just your responsibility, but if masses of people will change their view and say, listen, I'm going to get involved. My country is really in a bad spot. I can see it. And I can't afford, not for my sake or my children's sake or my grandchildren's sake, for me to be a bystander. I'm going to make a change. And I'm going to register my vote and cast my vote for righteousness. And I'm going to take a stand. I was wrong in the past, and I was wrong to think that my vote doesn't count. If we make a change and encourage others to get out there and to get out that vote, then I believe that it can make a difference in our country. We're at 25%. No wonder you think that the Christian vote doesn't do any good, because it's only 25% of Christians actually voting. We have to change the minds of those who have been apathetic, who have fallen down in their domestic duties, to make a change and to make a stand. And I hope this will encourage you to make a difference in this coming election. You've got time, plenty of time to get out of the vote. Even though voting has started, you can still get down there and register yourself to vote. And when it comes time to vote, take a stand for righteousness. But most of all, it is going to be prayer in our nation that will make a big difference. And part of our prayer is calling on those who have not voted in the past to take a stand, to be convicted of what they've done and not doing, and to start to make a change in that area. And pray that God does not give our nation what we deserve, but rather gives us mercy and gives us what we need. Well, that's going to be it for today. Thank you for joining us here today. We'll be back again tomorrow at the corner of truth and courage. God bless you.